in innovation and entrepreneurship? Are there risks in innovation?
Yes, there's always risk.
Tell me.
Remember, you came up with an idea. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And only when you take the risk, then you would know.
And what about the entrepreneur? How many risks involved?
I think you
One
have
may be financial, and one may be more of work ethics. Probably, I would say, if it's innovation, the risk will be you're not sure if what will come out of it because you're innovation, you're thinking about something. But persistence, more or less, take care of that. I feel more persistence here, you would get you with the innovation in just a matter of time. Where entrepreneurship is concerned with risk taking, it is more a tangible thing. You find like you would like it might be finance or going into business with someone or something like that. So that's more or less one kind of more intangible and one tangible.
Would you have to have a registered company to be able to access these services?
No. And anyone could come and register. What we do as well is that we take information from the persons who come just for our reporting purposes, just to have an idea if you are a registered business, but it's not mandatory that you have to be a registered business to use the services.
I should also mention persons who wish to use the lab can also bring their own materials once it's compatible with the machines. So therefore, the cost would then be time on the machines. And as Chris mentioned, because our mandate is to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship, the costs are heavily subsidized.
And is there an average cost per hour on the machine?
Yes, so like for the laser cutter, currently it's like $40 per half hour. Now, because of the nature of the laser cutter, it moves fast. So you can't do a lot within that time. Now, where persons, well, this might be going into the economics of it, but where persons might see the cost, so like the time, let's say if you're doing one item, because we charge per half hour, you may pay the same price as if you did 5 items within that same half hour, because it's charged per half hour. So it's ideal if you're doing mock-ups, just to be aware of, you can make as much varieties as you want, so that within that time, you get as much out of it for the money that you're spending. But we go through this with the customers so that they be aware before they make their decision. By the way, into some of the activities that the lab performs. So I know I would have been mentioning it as Fab Lab all this time, but we actually have 2 areas. We have the Creative Design Lab, where all of these equipment are placed. And then we have the Robomania Lab, where we basically teach persons about robotics and robotic technology. It's also from that lab where we would do first Lego League, which we recently completed, which is a robotics competition where it gets kids involved in competition, as they say, which is healthy competition, and also gracious professionalism, where they learn to compete graciously amongst various teams in the field of robotics and basically having them identify problems and come up with solutions. So the first area we look at is rotation. So when the lab was open, we actually did rotations with various schools or various groups that would come to the Science Center to basically show them what technology we have available and highlight them to various aspects of how the technology could be used and whatever services that we offer. The next area would be workshops. So we basically teach persons on various areas, whether it be CAD, CAM, to use the 3D printer and various services. These workshops that we're conducting now will eventually fall into some of these workshops where we offer different activities to the public so that they can get a all-around service. All of these would have come up from initiatives where we saw from clients coming to the lab and actually identifying that they needed to get more assistance in various areas. And this is our way of trying to supply that need that the clients would have indicated. Another one would be outreaches. So outreaches basically refer to when we get requests from various groups or schools in terms of they may not be able to come to the Science Center, but they would like us to come and do a display, so that we would go to these areas, carry various technologies and various equipment and basically do a display there. In some cases, it would be like electronic components, either we would carry a laptop to show persons the software that we use, or we'd even carry a 3D printer to show persons how the 3D printer can be used and how they could potentially use it. And the last one would be Fab Lab jobs, where persons would contact us with a particular idea they may want to have, and we would try to assist them as best as we could, right? So what I'm going to go through now is design thinking. So let's just say, what is design thinking? So basically, design thinking is the process which looks to solve problems by approaching it from the user's perspective. So it basically puts the emphasis on the user rather than the product. So in most cases, sometimes we come up with the product first and then want to look at the users. But in the ideal case, you may want to look at what your user really wants and developing a product or a service that could best reach them. All right. So we'll now go through the design thinking process. So the first phase is to empathize. So one of the key parts of that is really to identify your target audience. Now, if I were to do a survey in the room, who could identify their target audience if they have a business? Anybody? These people are a little bit shy. All right. So the target audience, you really want to look at a key specific group of people who are going to use your particular product or service. In some cases, you could do something and it could reach a wide spectrum. You can make it general and it could reach everyone. But in most cases, if you have an idea of who your age group is going to, or the age group of the persons who you're going to do, whether it's teenagers, early adults, persons in their 30s and stuff like that, you can better target what you're doing to suit that particular audience needs. Another thing you'd want to do is engage and observe your target audience. So once you've identified who your target audience is, you'd want to basically engage them, whether it be through interviews or surveys, to find out what it is that their interests lie. And to move on from that, you'd also want to know what are the challenges and what their needs are. So once you have a clear picture of this, you'd better be able to come up with things or ideas that could reach them better.
In the chat, Kizzy said that her problem is finding target audience. That's her problem area, is to find her target audience.
Okay. I don't know if Kizzy want to say what service industry, or what industry she's in, if it's food, agriculture, crafts.
I'm not sure if she said, she said it's craft.
Crafts, all right, cool. Well, ideally, what you could look at is based on, if you're selling your particular product, you would have an idea of who are the persons who are actually purchasing your products. What I would suggest is that you have surveys. It doesn't need to be physical surveys. It could be something digital that you could share with them. So if you keep the contact information of persons who purchase from you, it better be able for you to reach out to them either on social media or through a survey that you could send to them. Because in some cases, persons may be buying your product, but they're buying it for someone else. So that way you could basically narrow down. If you aren't aware of who your target audience is, you can look at who are the persons that are purchasing your product. And then you could find out why they purchase your product versus, let's say, someone else's product. And that way you can narrow down who your target audience is. So that way, in future, you could know that if it's younger persons, well, you could do more social media ads. You may not need to do printed ads or go to the traditional media, because most of the young persons would either be reaching you through social media. So you could target the way you market to those areas and also look at that as saving some of your costs. I hope that kind of answers your question, Kizzy.
Yes, it helps to a point. Not to be a bit too much info to share this.
Yeah, not a problem.
But it helps.
Okay, sure. Right. The next one is, once you've identified your target audience, so you have an idea of who the group of people that you're targeting your product or service to, you want to make sure you create now a problem statement, which is basically just highlighting what the major problem is. Now most times you could write a whole essay on what the problems are for the particular target audience, but you want to narrow it down into a key area which you feel that you can address, right? And the second thing is that this might sound a little strange for some persons, but you want to focus on the needs of the user or your customer more than the business goals at this point, because you're really looking at focusing or human-centered, meaning that you're targeting whatever solution you're creating for a particular user. In some cases, persons have had success where they've created something and persons gravitate towards it rather than you having to focus on them. But in most cases, the persons who see a lot more success is those who really focus on that user experience, because you get buy-in from the user and they tend to stay longer when they feel that their needs are being addressed. All right. The next thing is you want to ideate. Now, this basically means you've now identified your group, you understand what their challenges and their needs are. You've defined it, you've written it down, you've focused on the key one or ones that you feel that you can address. You now want to come up with potential solutions to these problems that you have identified. So one of the key things is to collaborate with others. You will have a team, you could have your family, you could have your friends, you could have your business partners. The purpose of that is that sometimes if you're in isolation and you're the only one looking at a particular issue, it's sometimes you go down a road of tunnel vision because you tend to be closed in on what you want and what you feel the customer needs. And sometimes it takes someone, I'm sure everyone would have had that experience where you have a certain scenario, you have an idea of how you want to solve it, and then someone may come and give you a suggestion that you never thought about or you never looked at it in that particular perspective, and it actually made sense. So this is why sometimes collaborating with others, in some cases, like if you had a business that didn't have technology involved in it, and you couldn't supply that part of it, it's sometimes you would have to reach out to someone. But as one of the participants mentioned, if you had the time, you could also learn it yourself and develop it. But again, you would need to collaborate. As he said, he had a mentor, so that you would still need to collaborate with someone to give you the proper insights that you would need to guide you in the proper direction. So although, yes, we like to keep things and having control of our ideas and our intellectual property, once done properly, getting collaboration from others can also be beneficial to what you're trying to do. The next thing is go for quantity over quality. The purpose of that is that you don't want in the idea generation phase to basically limit yourself by already prejudging a particular idea. A lot of times, I'm sure most of us would have been in groups. Sometimes someone has an idea, and before you even filter through the idea, you already tell the person that you're going to work. And so some of you who had ideas, or entrepreneurs and business people, you had ideas, and before you even do anything with it, somebody will tell you they're going to work, nobody will buy that, don't bother with it. And this is sometimes not the best situation, because what you really want to do is come up with as much ideas as you can. There's a natural filter in whatever you do that eliminates what can and can't work. And this is normally a constraint, whether it could be capital, your resources, or even your knowledge and your expertise, and your time, which could limit what ideas you actually push forward. So don't judge an idea based on what the idea is. Let the filter that you have in terms of what are the specific constraints that you have to work with determine which ideas you go forward with. So that way you can actually have a better idea. Because there are some cases where you may actually have two ideas and you can take part from one and add it to another one and make it an even better idea. But if you eliminated that idea in the beginning, you would have then prevented yourself from actually making that connection with those two ideas. And lastly, in this is really think outside the box. Because as you've seen with the pet rock, it's sky's the limit sometimes with what you can actually make a profit from. It all depends on either how you add value to it or how you target that specific audience. The next thing is prototypes. After you've fixed a particular solution or solutions, you want to come up with a prototype of it. The purpose of this is that you need customers to actually use what you've created and for you to get feedback from them in order for you to redefine and make improvements for it. So these prototypes need to be something tangible. Now, the reason why I would say tangible is because you can do simulations of prototypes, but those don't give you that user experience that you may really need in order to really make the product or service into what you want it to be. Now, sometimes I heard the group mention earlier about the customer service in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, it's in dire need of improvements. But one of the things we need to look at is that, is the customer service the way it is because it's naturally poor, or because we as consumers or these companies don't value the consumer as much to improve it? And we as the consumers don't show the businesses that we really need better customer service in order to continue buying the product. Because it's one thing we say that a business has poor customer service, but we still partake of their goods and services. So in their mind, there is no need really to address it. So until the customers actually make them or show them that this is important for me to utilize your goods and services. So that is one of the key things of having the prototype tangible, so that you could test it with your particular target audience, so that you can get an idea of what things you may have missed or what things you can add to improve it to make it more viable for them, right? And just remember, the last thing is that prototypes are not your final vision, so that you will always be making changes and modifications even when you actually finish what you've done. I'm sure most of you would have that experience.
I don't know if all of you may be aware, but most successful businesses always have a vision and mission statement to be able to show the persons who are buying their product or investing in their product the aims and the goals of their company. This also is like a reminder to the employees, the purpose at the company they are working at, and to motivate them to work towards this goal. So your vision, it is a forward-looking starting point, and it tells you the future of your company and why it is important to work towards this. We have an example here, Apple's vision statement. Everybody know Apple, big phone company. Not only phones now, they develop, and first they came out with the iPod, then they came out with phones. That making iPod. Now the phone made the iPod obsolete, but now they have Apple iPads, pens, watches, computers. Won't be surprised if they won't have a car just now soon. So their vision statement, to make the best products on earth and to leave the world better than we found it. So let's dissect this vision statement a little bit, because you all will have an activity at the end of my session on creating a vision statement, mission statement for your business. So their vision statement basically has these different components where they're showing that they're making technology creations, best products on earth. They want to empower the people by saying to leave the world better than we found it. They're enriching lives. That is what they're trying to portray through this statement. So then you have to go on to mission. This refers to the journey you are taking towards the future. So your vision is what you're mapping out, what you're trying to work to create. And the mission is how you plan to do it and why. So what it does is what you're willing to do or build to achieve your vision. It helps define success and makes you distinguish how you could be different from those in the market, as well as it should be actionable and concrete. Like vision, it should be fairly static with opportunities to realign when needed. It should adapt as you launch new products or experience. It lays out the goals, the big teams of works, and the go-to market approach that will help you achieve both the vision and mission. It is an operational plan. So this is how you're going to be able to have your high-level initiatives, what work items you have to do to achieve your vision and mission. So strategy basically is putting everything that you set out in your vision and mission into play. This is where you get the ball running. It could be just simply creating a business plan to then put in that business plan in action. As your strategy shifts, refresh your business page. That brings together why, what, and when of your current plan. It's always important to remember too that none of this is static. You can always go back and change it if depends on where the road takes you. So sometimes you may reach a certain part of your plan and you realize when you reach a feasibility plan, it's like, oh, this might make me enough money. I have to go back and change my strat further. So we have SWOT analysis. This is also important when you're developing your business plan. You have to think about opportunities, your threats. This is a framework you use to evaluate a company's competitive position, as well as develop strategic planning. It assesses not only the internal, but the external factors, as well as your current and future potential of your business. So you can see here a SWOT analysis, that is where it's a acronym, SWOT. So it's easy to remember your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So what is the strengths of your business? List that out. This is important to note because you would have to do that in your activity in a bit. What is the weaknesses? How you can work upon that. So if you list out all your weaknesses in front of you, you can be able to work on them. When you say, oh, well, right now I don't have a vehicle if I want to do delivery. So if that is your weakness, you work towards how you then turn that into your strength. So you say, okay, this is my weakness. Okay, I have to save this amount of money. So therefore I could pay this amount of money on my loan so I can take out a vehicle, stuff like that. It works best when diverse groups or voices within an organization are free to provide realistic data points rather than prescribed messaging. This analysis pulls information from the both factors, as I said, and it may have an impact on your decision. So like I said, your threats to your company, this other company now, they providing a product that you were selling at a cheaper cost. So now you have to go back and think, well, this might threaten my business. How do I have to work upon this? SMART, just like SWOT, is an acronym where it stands for specific, measurable, actionable, resource-driven, and time-bound. You have to remember, always think SMART when you're doing anything. We not only mean that in the sense of the word SMART, but in the acronym SMART. Always be specific. This is where the goal should leave no room for misinterpretation. You make sure your goal is concise, measurable. The goal should be quantifiable, and progress should be easy to track. Achievable. You have to be realistic with your goals. Come on now. You're not going to say, oh, I'm going to go to the moon when you have no background in engineering to say, okay, I could be an astronaut. You know, be a little more realistic. Come on. Then, it's good to get feedback sometimes, but nothing wrong with aiming for the stars. Come on. Relevant or resource driven. This should contribute to your broader overarching goals. And finally, time bound. The goal should have a defined start date, and end date. You should have time slots to create deadlines so you can work towards those. Tell me, what is a business plan? Somebody put on the mic. Tell me what they think. What do you think, in their opinion, is a business plan?
If I may, just to get the ball rolling. So it's a map essentially of all the things that you need in order to get your business started, starting with a marketing analysis. So some sort of market analysis to know who your competitors are, who your target market is, and then it will have a financial plan as well in terms of where you would get your funding source, how much money you intend to make, and so on. And then I think it also has some projections in it. I can't remember the details of that exactly, but that's basically what goes into the business plan. That marketing and financial part of it is really what's important, I think.
Wow, I really, really like that answer, Claire. You hit some of the points there. I feel like I don't even financial planning. You have to know how to improve your cash flow, your net profits, your revenues, your overhead costs. All these things you need to know to determine your business's financial resources and what goals to accomplish. Marketing. Marketing is very important, and creating a marketing plan is this document that lays out all the efforts of the business for the upcoming period. Let's start off with 1 year, which is a good time frame. It outlines the marketing strategy, the promotional and advertising activities planned for the period. And we have operational planning. So your operational objectives are attainable. It have to be action-oriented and more short-term goals that the organization sets and aims to accomplish by either taking larger or long-term objectives. So you must have some short-term objectives, and then you have to have some long-term objectives. So let me give you an example of a strategic objective. Let's say you want to make your production more cost-effective. If your broader strategic objective is to cut production costs without sacrificing too much productivity, some operational objectives might be to reduce scheduling, or you revamp your training of your employees to improve efficiency, stuff like that. So business goals and objectives. So these are the outcomes an organization aims to achieve. So basically the whole thing of this business plan is what we remember we outline our goals and aims already with our vision and mission statements. So now this plan is how we planning to do that, how we trying to achieve these things we want. It could be broad and long-term, or it could be specific. Many professionals use the terms business goal and business objective interchangeably, but the business goal is more broad while the business objective is more specific. So you know how I just mentioned, it can either be broad and long-term or specific and short-term. The business goals is long-term and broad, opposed to the business objectives is specific and short-term. So that is important to remember.
So the business plan is the detailed document that outlines your business goals, strategies, market analysis, financial projections, and operational plans. And the pitch is a concise and persuasive presentation that you use to introduce your business idea to potential investors, customers, or partners. Right. So these are some of the questions that your pitch should be able to answer. What is your business and what does it do? What problem are you solving and for whom? What is your unique value proposition or competitive advantage? How do you make your money or generate revenue? How much money do you need and what will you use it for? And what are your goals and milestones? So this is usually the case for longer pitches. But when I go through the elevator pitch with you, you would see that we maybe just extract a few of these points to keep it very concise and within a much shorter time frame. These were some of the things that I would have spoken about for the elevator pitch. A short summary. It's useful for every business owner to have an elevator pitch at the tip of their tongue, ready for any occasion, because you do not know when an opportunity may arise to share your idea with a potential investor or a potential customer, or someone who would help to support or advocate for your business. So as I mentioned, it should be attention grabbing, exciting, quickly informative, and it's a way to demonstrate your professional aptitude, strengths, and skills to capture the attention and interest of your listeners and convince them to take the next step with you, which may potentially mean a follow-up meeting or the potential for a pitch in front of an investor, an angel investor, or venture capitalist. For the event that you may have this encounter and how you can clearly articulate and summarize your statement with just a few words, because remember, in today's world, it just seems that our attention span as well seems to be getting less and less, and there's so much information being thrown at us that we just want tidbits of concise information. You also want to be clear, keep your pitch simple, understandable, even by people who don't know your industry. Avoid jargon, technical terms that may be confusing, and focus on the benefits and the value of what you offer, not just the features or the functions. So depending on the situation, tailor the time of your pitch, prepare different versions for different scenarios. For example, you might have a 1-sentence pitch for a quick introduction, a 30-second pitch for a networking event, or a 1-minute pitch for a more formal meeting. And again, I would just want to reiterate, the best way to prepare for your pitch is to practice as much as possible, because practicing will help you to memorize the key points that you want to mention in your pitch. And ideally, you can practice at home with your family, your friends, even coworkers, get that feedback and see how you could improve upon this pitch that you have in your mind with you as you just move forward.
Is marketing is the process of getting potential clients and customers interested in your products and services. Exactly what it says on the slide, it involves researching, promoting, selling, and distributing your products or services. Marketing is identifying the needs of customers and satisfying them better than your competitors in order to make a profit. What you would realize is that marketing has changed over the years. Compared to the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, marketing has evolved. And as we go through this program, you'd realize how much of an evolution it has taken place. Before, in the early 80s or 70s, somebody will define marketing in simple terms as just advertising, just handing out flyers. But in a nutshell, what you would realize is marketing is turning a potential customer into a loyal customer. And to do that, it involves many different variables. It involves product distribution, promotion, designing and creating materials like social media content, improving a customer's experience, and doing market research. So from that explanation alone, one can tell that marketing is no simple task. And you tend to realize that before, while a company might just have marketing personnel, now companies are looking for a marketing team. So as you get into your entrepreneurial journey, while you yourself would realize that you are a marketer, you're the HR person, as your business grows, you're going to realize, based on the environment you're getting yourself into, you're going to require a marketing team. What would I advise you is try not to sell the characteristics of the product, but that perception you would like to have your customers feel when they buy your product. Optimization. In order to engage in proper marketing, you have to learn about your market. What you would realize whenever you engage in marketing, marketing is not an 8 to 4 job, especially as an entrepreneur. People like to say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to work for myself and I want to control my time and I want to work on my own time. I assure you, when you become an entrepreneur, if you move from a job that used to work from 8 to 4 and now become an entrepreneur, you tend to realize you're going to be working more hours, especially when you're now starting up the company. Not to discourage anyone, it's just to give you guys a reflection of reality. What is market research? Does anyone would like to give me an answer on what they think market research is?
A way for you to get information about how your product will do in the public domain.
When you get into business, you'd realize that most of your time will spend gathering information, analyzing information. The less portion of your time might be spent executing, right? The more information you can get and the more analytics about person's habits, their needs, their wants will help you in the long run. One is building trust in your brand. You always want a brand whereby people can find trustworthy. Once people find your brand is trustworthy, they tend to realize that even though there's an increase in price, they will remain loyal customers. One of the simplest things to do, or marketing tool that you can do in building trust, is following up with your customers. These are examples of marketing channels, digital marketing channels. What would I would advise you to do again, look for those channels where your audience are located. And also keep in mind your budget. These are 2 things that you want to keep in mind, or 3 things: your products or services, what you're offering, the location of your customer base, as well as your budget. Try not to be too ambitious and always be mindful of your budget, but try not to be too, skeptic, or try not to be too doubting yourself, as they say. And like I said, when you're deciding what channel to choose, again, customer, location of customer, product, budget. There are other things to consider, but those sometimes tend to be the top 3. Also, you want to take into consideration your goal, what you want to achieve in this season. That is something you really want to take into consideration about your goal.
So, costing and pricing strategies. A pricing strategy is the approach you use to set the ideal price for your product. All right, your strategy must consider factors such as revenue goals, product features, and audience, as well as competitors' prices, economic trends, and consumer demand. Something we have to consider, let's point out, is the competitors' prices. If you're selling a product and you want to sell it as a premium, right, you can't go to an unrealistic price, even though it might cost you a lot, or you find ways in way to keep your costs down so you could sell it and make a good profit. taking into consideration, right, the competitor's price. You don't want to sell it for way too much. Say there's Charles chocolates here, right, in Trinidad, and everybody knows about Charles, but not everybody prefers Charles. So somebody may come out with a better chocolate. Let's look at, what's the other one? I think Marshall has a chocolate, but it's sold as a premium, right? So his pricing can be so exorbitant that, you know, it is so more expensive than Charles, right? But it tastes just as good as Charles, right? So you also want to consider the competitors' prices when you because that's what they see when they go into the groceries, they go into, you know, the market and stuff. So cash flow statements, or CFS for short, measures how well a company generates cash to pay its debt obligations, or in some cases, their liabilities, funds its operating expenses, and fund investments. The cash flow statement complements the balance sheet and income statement, so they work hand in hand with each other. One depends on the other. The CFS, or cash flow statements, also allows investors to understand how a company operations are running, where its money is coming from, and how the money is being spent. The CFS also provides insight as to whether a company is on a solid financial footing. This is a reflection, and really for investors, they'll be looking at these things.
And what is cash flow projections? Basically, the cash flow projection is what the company expects to be coming in, right? The small business, what is expected to be coming in and what is expected to be coming out money-wise, right? What is expended, what you are expected to spend for resources, and what you get back in the sense of selling a product or skill or service, right? Ultimately, a cash flow projection is what the company is expected. It's an overview of how much cash the business is expected to have on hand at the end of every month, right? Cash flow is good for small businesses, companies to manage flow. It could be a big difference in making a company successful or fail, right? You knowing how your money flows in and out of the organization, and understanding and predicting the flow of the money in and out of your business, however, can help the entrepreneur make smarter decisions. You yourselves, if you're determined to start up, or even at the businesses that we created, or services that we created earlier on in the program, how these making decisions within those businesses themselves.
So for funding opportunities, right, there may be different types. So we have equity financing, which is applying for government or university financing. You have that as well too. And then you have different ones with crowdfunding as well too, right? So you have to look at the different types of financing opportunities available and which one will be best for your business, right? So each one comes with different risks that, you know, you have to give up certain things to achieve that funding. So you have to understand when you doing your financing for your business, you have to have a proper financial plan. You have to monitor and review the costs, and you have to understand, okay, is this the correct funding that you need for your business? Because if you need to gain support from the bank, investors, or venture capitalists, you have to have a proper financial plan to give to them. And that is the only way for successful growth of the business. You have to look at the financial plan properly, and you have to know, okay, this is what you need to get done. You have to account for everything in a startup. So if your business falls within that line, they will able to give you this lump sum, a loan, that kind of thing, to start your business, and you pay it back later, that kind of thing. Then you have Curry, the business hatchery program, where they provide support for entrepreneurs by offering training, counseling, and financing as well too, right? So this one, they actually give you the training. So they help you as you go along, so like a mentorship kind of thing, where they want to see, okay, your business starts at a level, they sit down with you, they plan it out, that kind of stuff. So you have somebody there helping you, and they give you money as well. So you have the money to start up your business, but you also have somebody to kind of go to and talk to about, okay, what is the next step? You think this is the best way to go forward with it, and that kind of stuff, right? And they have business development company, netco, and pitching competitions, right? To obtain that kind of a loan as well. And so the optimal funding sources for innovation, right? So the funding sources that are right for you depend on your business needs and can be complex. So you seek advice from a professional such as your accountant before going forward on any of them, right? So through the different types of funding we talk about, like the grant funding, crowdfunding, equity, and any debt as well too, right? You have to think about it and say, okay, which one you think is best for my business? Talk to a professional, find out if that person could tell you, well, all right, let's see how your cost is for the business, how things are looking, what are the projections we have for that business, right? And if you could go forward with crowdfunding instead, or you could do the equity where you know for sure if you give up management control in your business is totally fine, because you know you don't want to worry about paying back that lump sum of cash later down, or you know you need the debt financing instead, where you go to the bank, you go to a credit union, you get the loan, and you're able to pay it back as you go along. So remember, you'll have to pay back that like every month, that kind of thing, right? As you go along, and you say, okay, well, your accountant will go through everything, your finances for the business, say that, all right, well, you're able to put aside X amount to pay the bank back on your loan, and you have enough to cover whatever overhead expenses you have in the business as well too.
So a sole proprietorship is owned by one single person / entity, right? So one person makes all of the decisions, and it's an unincorporated business. Sole proprietorships. The owner of a sole proprietorship is the person who has to deal with everything, and their finances and the business finances is one. There are no separate legal entities in this. So your business and you are one legal entity, right? So some of the legal requirements for sole proprietorship can be to register your business name, even though we did say that a lot of them don't. That is one of the legal requirements that you can do, which is to register your business name. You have to register for a BIR number. You have to file annual individual tax returns and maintain accounting records. If your sole proprietor business has employees, then you'll also have to request health surcharge accounts, request a payee account, and then file monthly returns for both. And then you also have to ensure that your workers have BIR numbers, right? So to go through sole proprietorship one more time, it's an unincorporated business, and the owner pays personal income tax on the profits in the business. Sole proprietorships are easy to establish and dismantle due to the lack of government involvement. Most small businesses start as a sole proprietorship, and then they will transition into limited liability entity or a corporation. Limited liability companies. So limited liability companies are a business structure that protects owners' personal assets, right? So with this one, there is a separation between the legal, there's a separation between the legal aspects for you and for your company. So this structure, it protects owners from personal responsibility for the business's liabilities and debts. So your personal funds, your personal cash will not be automatically incorporated into this. There is a legal protection there. Some of the differences between an LLC and a partnership would be that the LLC separates the business assets of the companies, while in a partnership, the business assets are your assets, are the person's, the owner's assets. And as I said before, both LLC and partnerships are allowed to pass through their profits, and they would be able to pay their taxes through the owners.
WIPO, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, states that IP is really a creation of the mind. And this could include inventions, literary or artistic work, design, symbols, names, images, all in the aim of commerce or making patents, right? So it's basically a document that you create and you go to the various bodies who oversee IP rights in order to get protection. So a patent is an exclusive right granted for an invention, which is a product or a process that provides in general a new way of doing something or offers a new technical solution to a particular problem. By definition, the patent itself is a blueprint of your entire product, so that someone who is skilled in the field can take that and recreate it. We'll see why that is important as I go through this particular protection. 3 of the main areas to look at when seeking to get a patent is novelty, meaning that what you've created, is it new? There's nothing like it existing. 2, inventive step, meaning that someone who has some skill in the particular field, let's say if you were making something in the field of electronics, someone who has the skill in electronics can be able or shouldn't be able to make this change or this innovation that you are making. So meaning that it's not something obvious. It's something that you actually had to be creative and innovative on in terms of creating. And the last one would be industrial applicability. This meaning that there is an application for whatever you've created. Some key points to note is that patent gives owners an exclusive right to their invention. That just means that you have the right to basically say who uses it. You can also share those rights with other persons with licensing agreements. So meaning that you would file a patent for a particular product, but you don't actually make it, but then you could license it to a manufacturer who would make it and sell it, and you would just get profits from that. Patents are also territorial, meaning that they based on where you file it. So if you, now it just has a caveat with that. When I reach at the end, I'll just explain it. Yes, it's territorial in terms of if someone is coming into Trinidad, you would need to file a patent with Trinidad. Now, some persons might say, why am I filing a patent in Trinidad? It doesn't have that large of a market. I'm not going to make that much money. Normally, people file patents in areas where they either feel there's competition, where someone could either recreate it and sell it over, or it's a large enough market where you can boost or benefit from the profits that you'd make from your invention. So most persons, they might think Trinidad isn't big enough, but we have a lot of patents being filed, not locally from local persons, but from international companies who actually want to do business here. So a lot of the industries, they would have patents being filed so that no other organization could use their particular product in their services without them having to get some sort of remuneration for it. The caveat with the territorial rights is that there's something called the PCT, which is the Patent Cooperation Treaty. Fortunately, Trinidad is signed on to that. So in the past, if you had to go and file a patent, you'd have to file it in each of these individual countries. Now, this is sometimes costly because if you go into a country that speaks a different language, you also have to pay for translation into that particular language, also knowing what their laws are. And sometimes the patent laws may be different in different countries. But with the PCT, it basically has a group of countries which have signed on to that. So it basically means that once you file in Trinidad, you also file in these other countries simultaneously as well. So that means once you file it here, because of our IPO signing on to the Patent Cooperation Treaty, you also file in these other countries as well. So that takes away some of the hassle of you having to go and file in these other countries. Now, the patent generally lasts for 20 years from your filing date. There's a technicality with, depending on how you file, you might get 21 years, but generally it's 20 years. Within that 20 years, you have to maximize the amount of profits you can make from your invention. This is why having a plan is important, because you want to know if I'm spending or investing this money into filing a patent, I want to know how for these 20 years, I'm going to generate as much money as I can. Because you do have to pay at some fees to keep the patent going for that 20 years. It's not that once you file it, it's automatic for the 20 years. There are some additional fees you have to pay ever so often in order to keep the patent going. There's some caveats with that in terms of there are, like in the past, they would have had persons who would have done patent mining. So where the patents were territorial, meaning that if no one filed in Trinidad, if you go on the sites where someone has filed a patent, because it's public documents. So if you find the patent, you could have actually recreated it here in Trinidad without infringing on that person's rights, because they would not have filed here. But because we're part of the PCT, it now means they're filed here as well.
The production process is the way we make a product and depend on the type of product and volume required. There are different methods of production used by businesses, right? So the production process helps to validate product concept early in your product development process. So it's about making a production plan. Once the production can begin, you could have like a minimum viable product status, right? Because sometimes when you make orders overseas, you have to have a certain amount that you have to request. It also helps product managers get user feedback as fast as possible to iterate and make small incremental improvements to the product. So the minimum viable product is the version of a product with just enough functionality for early customers to use. Exporting can increase sales and profits by reaching more customers and diversifying risks, right? So I want you to all have and envision your entrepreneurship business, or the one that you might intend to implement in the future to come. It might be a small business at this time, and you may or may not be able to export, but you never know if your vision is larger and you might you might become a bigger business and you might actually be capable of exporting products. But what you could do, you could just think about it, you know. This is just about learning for those. You never know what opportunity might be before you in time to come. So exporting can also increase competitiveness and knowledge by exposing businesses to new ideas, practices, techniques, and ways of competing. You know, so exposure to a foreign market could bring about these things, right? Exporting may allow businesses to sell niche or specialty products for higher prices and larger volumes. So think about, you know, a product like how did the group before discuss Trinidad, I think it was group 3 or group 2 had mentioned Trinitario cocoa, you know, that's a special thing and we've heard it over and over, you know, our cocoa is special. So, I mean, a lot of things, look at Jacob's back in the day when they had Jacob's flying fish. And I'm sure that Barbados exports their flying fish to foreign markets and it's a unique product. And then Tobago also makes smoked tuna and stuff and they export it, I believe. So instead of confining itself within its geographical borders, countries often internationally seek external markets around the world for commerce, allowing greater revenue and transactional opportunity.